After 40 years of scrubbing other people's floors, I was finally going to sign the deed to my own house. But what I heard that day shattered me forever. I never thought the happiest day of my life would turn into the most painful. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. My name is Helen Grace Miller. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived my whole life in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, New York. My hands are marked by decades of work, deep calluses, swollen knuckles, small scars that tell the story of a woman who never gave up. My back is slightly stooped, not from age, but from years of carrying heavy laundry baskets, of cleaning enormous houses on my knees, of supporting a family with these hands that now tremble when I hold my mug of coffee. This October morning, as I waited for the bus that would take me to the lawyer's office for the closing, I put on my best dress, a navy blue one I bought 5 years ago at a flea market for my granddaughter's graduation. I gathered my gray hair into a tight bun, put on the silver earrings that belonged to my mother, and for the first time in months, I looked at myself in the mirror with something resembling joy. I was going to sign the deed to my house. My house. After 40 years cleaning mansions on the Upper East Side, saving dollar by dollar in a cookie tin hidden behind the wardrobe, denying myself every whim, every comfort, I had finally saved enough to buy a small 2-bedroom house in a quiet part of Long Island. It wasn't the Hamptons, but it was mine. With its chipped tiles, its small yard where I planned to plant geraniums, and its windows that looked out onto the street where my children grew up. The bus arrived 20 minutes late, as usual. I got on, clutching the plastic tote bag where I kept all my documents, my yellowed birth certificate, pay stubs from the houses where I worked, the proof of the down payment I had made 3 months ago. Each piece of paper represented years of sacrifice, of getting up at 5 in the morning, of coming home after dark, of eating canned soup for dinner because my entire salary went to supporting my 3 children. My daughter Patricia, the oldest, had insisted on coming with me. "Oh, Mom, don't go alone. Those lawyers take advantage of people like us. I'd better go with you, just to make sure everything's right," she had told me last Sunday, while we were having lunch at her house in a nice suburb in New Jersey. A beautiful house, with a garden and 2 cars in the driveway, which her husband had bought with his job at an insurance company. Patricia had always been the smartest of my children. She graduated as an accountant, married a man from a good family, and managed to get out of the old neighborhood. I was proud of her, although sometimes when I visited, I noticed how her children looked at me with that mix of affection and pity reserved for poor grandparents. Their furniture was leather, their television was bigger than my entire living room, and their refrigerator was always full of things I had only seen in the supermarkets where I never shopped. We arrived at Mr. Davis's office at 3 o'clock sharp. It was a small office in a building in Midtown Manhattan, with marble stairs that echoed with every step. Patricia helped me up, holding my arm as if I were a frail old woman, even though I could still carry a full bucket of water without any trouble. The secretary showed us into a waiting room with plastic chairs and a coffee table full of old magazines. Patricia looked nervous, constantly checking her phone, and when I asked if everything was okay, she answered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Mom. I just want everything to be perfect for you." Mr. Davis received us half an hour later. He was a thin man with a gray mustache and glasses, who spoke in that slow voice professionals use when they want to sound important. His office smelled of cold coffee and old paper, with a cross on the wall and framed diplomas that I couldn't read, but that impressed me. "Mrs. Miller, a pleasure to meet you," he said, shaking my hand. "Your daughter has already explained everything to me. We'll proceed with the closing." I sat in front of his desk while he took out a thick folder full of documents. Patricia sat next to me, but I noticed she avoided looking at me directly. The lawyer began to explain terms I didn't understand. Life estate, co-ownership, beneficiaries, words that got lost in my head like water in dry soil. "Could you explain that more slowly?" I asked, but Patricia immediately intervened. "Mom, don't worry. I'll handle understanding everything. You just sign where the lawyer tells you." For several minutes, the lawyer and my daughter spoke to each other, using words I didn't comprehend, while I sat there, feeling smaller and smaller in that leather chair that swallowed me. At one point, the lawyer said he needed to make some copies and left the office, leaving me alone with Patricia. It was then that I heard something that changed my life forever. My daughter got up from her chair and walked to the window, pulling out her phone. I thought she was going to call her husband to tell him the good news, but what I heard froze my blood. "Yeah, we're here now," she whispered into the phone, her back to me. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. The lawyer has everything ready, just like we planned." My heart started beating so hard I thought she would hear it. I stayed frozen in the chair, pretending to look over my papers while I strained to listen. "I'm telling you, it's perfectly arranged," Patricia continued in a voice I had never heard from her, cold and calculating. "She's going to sign as a life tenant, but the property stays in my name. When she dies, it's automatically mine. And if she gets difficult or starts with her old lady dementia, I have power of attorney to put her wherever I want." The words hit me like stones in my stomach. Life tenant? What did that mean? Why wasn't the house going to be in my name if I was the one paying for it with my savings? "Don't be dramatic, Robert," she went on, speaking to who I now knew was her husband. "It's a perfect investment. She pays for everything. We get an extra property. And when she's gone, well, you know. Besides, at 68, how long does she have left? 5 years? 10, max?" I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over me. My own daughter, the little girl I had held in my arms during her fevers, the one I had walked to school every day because we couldn't afford the bus, the one I had given my last dollar to so she could get her degree, was planning to steal from me. "Look, my mom is sweet, but clueless," she continued with that dismissive tone that broke my soul. "She never understands legal papers. I'll tell her it's to protect her from someone taking it, and she'll sign anything. She's always trusted me blindly." She was right about that. I had always trusted her. When she told me it was better for her to handle my Social Security deposits because I didn't know how to use an ATM. When she convinced me to make my savings account a joint account so she could help me in emergencies. When she had me sign papers she said were for my pension, but which I now realized I never fully understood. "Do I feel guilty?" I heard her laugh softly. "Robert, please. That woman lived her whole life in poverty because she's ignorant. She never knew how to manage money, never got ahead, was never anything more than a housekeeper. Do you really think she can maintain a house? In 6 months she'll be begging me to help with the bills, and I'll have to support her financially for the rest of her life." Every word was a stab. The ignorant woman who had worked since she was 12 to support her younger siblings when my father left us. The housekeeper who had cleaned offices at dawn to pay for her accounting studies. The one who never got ahead but had managed to make sure her 3 children became professionals. Besides, she went on with a cruelty I didn't know she possessed, her memory is already starting to go. The other day she asked me the same thing 3 times. "And you see how she dresses, how she sometimes smells. It's just a matter of time before she ends up in a state-run nursing home, and there she can just rot." I subconsciously touched the blue dress I had chosen so carefully that morning. It was true it wasn't new, that it had a few small stains that wouldn't come out no matter how hard I scrubbed. But it was clean. I had always made sure to be clean and presentable, even if my clothes were old. "Look, the lawyer's coming back," she whispered quickly. "I'll talk to you tonight. But you'll see. In an hour this will be settled, and we'll have another property in our portfolio." She hung up and turned to me with a radiant smile, the same smile she gave me when she was a little girl asking for candy money. "Everything okay, Mom? We're almost done. Are you excited?" I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize my daughter. It was like looking at a stranger who had taken over my little girl's body, a stranger who had meticulously planned to strip me of my life savings. "Yes, honey," I managed to whisper, my throat dry. "Very excited." Mr. Davis returned with more papers and began to explain where I had to sign. The letters blurred before my eyes, not because of bad eyesight, but because the tears I refused to shed clouded my vision. Patricia had moved closer and was guiding my hand gently, with a feigned tenderness that now made me sick to my stomach. "Here, Mom. And here, too. Don't worry about understanding everything. I'll explain it all to you later at home." I signed where they told me, though every stroke of my name felt like a betrayal of myself. The lawyer stamped the documents while talking about legal terms that I now knew were designed to confuse me. Patricia nodded and asked questions that sounded protective, but which I now understood were to ensure the scam was perfect. "There you go, Mrs. Miller," the lawyer finally said. "You have your house." But I knew I had nothing, that I had just handed over the savings of 40 years of work to the daughter who saw me as a burden, as an expense to be minimized until death solved the problem. We left the office, and Patricia hugged me on the street, in front of everyone passing by on the sidewalk. "Congratulations, Mom! You got your little house. See? I knew you could do it." Her hug felt as fake as everything else that had happened that afternoon, as if I were hugging an actress who had perfectly played the role of a loving daughter for 68 years of my life. On the bus ride back, while Patricia checked her phone and I stared out the window at the streets of a city that suddenly felt hostile and strange, I began to remember other things. Other signs I had ignored or justified with a mother's blind love. The weeks that followed were like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I moved into the little house on Long Island with the help of my old neighbors from Queens, because Patricia had said she was too busy with work to take the day off. Mr. Aurelio, who had an old pickup truck, helped me move my few belongings: my brass bed, my wooden wardrobe that I'd bought secondhand 20 years ago, my small television, and the cardboard boxes where I kept my memories. As I arranged my things in the house I thought was mine, I began to remember episodes that I had previously justified as a daughter's concern, but which I now saw in a different light. Like when Patricia convinced me to switch my bank to a more modern branch where she could help me with the transactions, or when she had me sign some papers she said were to ensure I received my full pension, but which she never explained in detail. I also remembered how her treatment of me had changed in recent years. She used to visit on Sundays with her children, tell me about her work, ask for my advice on raising the kids. But little by little, those visits had become shorter, more formal. She would arrive in a hurry, check that I was okay, and leave with some excuse about social commitments or pending work. The first clear sign that something was wrong came when I tried to pay the utility bills for the new house. I went to the electric company's office with my first bill, but the employee told me something I didn't understand. "Ma'am, this bill is in the name of Patricia Morales Vega. You can't pay it unless you bring a notarized power of attorney or the account holder comes with you." "But it's my house," I explained, confused. "I live there." The young woman looked at me with pity and repeated patiently, "Ma'am, you may live there, but legally someone else is responsible for the utilities." "Is she your daughter?" I went home with the unpaid bill and a growing anxiety in my chest. I called Patricia to ask, but her response was evasive. "Oh, Mom, that's normal. It's for legal protection. Don't you worry about those things, I'll take care of all the payments. You just live peacefully." But I wasn't at peace. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in what was supposed to be my own home. Things got worse when I came down with the flu in December. I had a high fever and my whole body ached. But when I called Patricia to ask her to take me to the doctor, her response left me cold. "Mom, I can't come running every time you feel sick. You're an adult. Get a cab or call an ambulance if it's so serious." Her voice sounded annoyed, as if my ailments were a childish whim. This was the same woman who, as a child, would run to my bed when she had nightmares, who would cry when I hurt myself cooking, who would hug me when I came home tired from work. That night, with a 104-degree fever and no one to care for me, I understood that I had lost more than my money. I had lost my daughter. My old friend Frank, who lived nearby, was the one who finally took me to the clinic. While we waited in the emergency room, I told him what had happened with the house and the bills. Frank, who had worked in construction his whole life but had the wisdom of men who have seen a lot of the world, shook his head sadly. "Helen, my friend, it sounds to me like Patty's playing you for a fool. Those papers you signed, did you read everything they said?" The truth was, I hadn't. I had trusted my daughter blindly, as I had my whole life. But now that trust felt like the most painful kind of naivety. "Look, Helen," Frank continued as a nurse called out numbers, "my sister-in-law went through something similar with her son. In the end, she had to get legal help because they had made her sign the house over to him, but she couldn't even sell it or leave it in her will. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. Was it possible that Patricia had done that to me? That the house I had worked 40 years for wasn't really mine? The next day, still weak from the flu, I went to see Sarah Jenkins, a lawyer who had a small office near the local market. The women in the neighborhood had recommended her because she helped working-class people with fair prices. Ms. Jenkins was a woman in her 50s, with short hair and glasses, who greeted me with kindness but without false promises. I told her my story while she took notes in a worn notebook. "Mrs. Miller, I need to see all the papers you signed that day," she said when I finished my story. "Bring me the copies they gave you, and also any documents you have of the payments you made for the house." I returned the next day with a bag full of papers I had kept religiously. The lawyer reviewed them for a long hour, making occasional faces that filled me with anxiety. Finally, she looked up and told me something that confirmed my worst fears. "Mrs. Miller, I'm afraid you are not the owner of this house. According to these documents, you have what's called a life estate, which means you can live there as long as you are alive, but you cannot sell the property. You cannot leave it in a will, and the true owner can revoke that right under certain circumstances." "What circumstances?" I asked, my voice breaking. "If the owner can prove that you can no longer care for yourself, that you have mental issues, or that the property is at risk under your care, she can revoke your right and have you evicted." My hands started to tremble. It all fit. Patricia's comments about my memory, her insistence that I could no longer manage on my own, her plan to put me in a home when it was convenient. "And my money?" I managed to ask. "Your money was used as payment, but since you are not the legal owner, it was technically a gift to your daughter. There's no way to get it back unless we can prove there was fraud or deceit." I left that office feeling like the world was crumbling beneath my feet. 40 years of work, of sacrifice, of denying myself everything, had become a gift to the daughter who now saw me as a burden. That night, sitting in the living room of the house that wasn't mine, looking at the walls I had painted with so much love, I understood that I had to make a decision. I could stay silent, accept my fate, and wait for Patricia to decide what to do with me, or I could fight. For the first time in my life, I decided to fight. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I didn't sleep, I barely ate, and every noise on the street made me think Patricia was coming to confront me or, worse, to kick me out of the house with some legal excuse I wouldn't understand. Ms. Jenkins had given me a task: gather all possible evidence that I had been deceived. But how do you prove the betrayal of a daughter? I started by going through all the papers I had stored in a shoebox. I found the receipts for every payment I had made for the house, the down payment, the monthly installments I had been making for 2 years, even the bank transfer slips. It hurt to look at each paper, because it represented entire weeks of eating just beans and rice to save that money. I also found something that chilled me to the bone, a paper Patricia had made me sign 6 months ago, telling me it was to update my information at the bank. I reviewed it line by line with a magnifying glass my neighbor lent me, and I discovered it was an authorization for her to make withdrawals from my savings account in case of a medical emergency or mental incapacity. That afternoon, I called the bank, and pretending I had a question about my account, I managed to get an employee to tell me something devastating. Patricia had been withdrawing money from my savings every month for the last 6 months. Small amounts, $100 or $200, that I hadn't noticed because I rarely checked my statements. "Your daughter has full authorization on the account, Mrs. Miller," the employee explained in a professional voice. "She can withdraw up to the monthly limit without needing to consult you." When I hung up the phone, I sat on my living room floor and cried like I hadn't cried since my mother died. I wasn't just crying for the money, but for the betrayal, for discovering that the daughter I had given everything to saw me as a source of income to be managed until it was completely drained. My friend Frank came to visit me that night and found me still on the floor, surrounded by papers and receipts. He sat beside me without saying anything for a long while until I managed to control my sobbing. "Helen," he finally said, "you have to decide if you're going to let that girl get away with this, or if you're going to fight like the strong woman I know you are." "But Frank," I replied, my voice breaking, "she's my daughter. How can I sue my own daughter?" "Helen, that girl stopped being your daughter the day she decided to steal from you. A real daughter wouldn't do that to her worst enemy." His words hurt. but I knew he was right. The Patricia I had raised, the one I had carried in my arms, the one I had held hands with on her first day of school, would never have been capable of planning something like this. The woman who had deceived me was a stranger who shared her name and her face. The next day, I went back to Ms. Jenkins and showed her everything I had found. Her eyes lit up when she saw the bank withdrawal receipts. "This changes everything, Mrs. Miller," she said excitedly. "Here we have a pattern of systematic financial abuse. Your daughter has been siphoning money from your account for months, using an authorization you signed under false pretenses." She explained that we could file a complaint for fraud and financial elder abuse, which was a serious crime. We could also challenge the deed to the house, arguing that it had been obtained through deceit and by taking advantage of my trust. "But you have to be prepared, Mrs. Miller," she warned me. "This is going to be very painful. Your daughter will deny everything. She will say that you are confused because of your age. She will try to paint you as a senile old woman who doesn't understand what she's saying." Those words reminded me of the phone conversation I had overheard at the lawyer's office. Patricia had already planned to use my age as an excuse, had already decided I was a foolish old woman who deserved no respect. "Ms. Jenkins," I said with a firmness that surprised even me. "I'd rather be seen as a crazy old woman fighting for her rights than a foolish old woman who lets her own daughter rob her." That same afternoon, Patricia arrived at the house unannounced. She came in as she always did, with her own key that I didn't know she had, calling out "Mom," as if she were the loving daughter she had pretended to be for so many years. I found her looking at the utility bills that had arrived that day, a look of annoyance on her face. "Mom, why haven't you paid the electric bill? They're going to cut off your service," she scolded me as if I were an irresponsible child. "Because they won't let me pay it," I answered calmly. "It's in your name, not mine." For the first time, I saw her get nervous. She fixed her hair and tried to smile, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Mom, I already explained that it's for protection." "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." "Patricia," I said, using her full name like when she was a child and had done something wrong, "I want you to explain to me why the house isn't in my name if I paid for it with my money." The mask fell completely. Her face changed, hardened, and for a moment I saw the cold, calculating woman who had spoken on the phone at the lawyer's office. "Mom, you're getting older. You don't understand how these legal things work anymore. I'm taking care of everything to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From yourself," she finally exploded. "Don't you realize you can't live alone anymore? That you're more confused every day? That you need someone to take charge of your affairs before you lose everything?" There it was. The truth. Patricia didn't see me as her mother, but as a burden to be managed. An incompetent old woman who needed to be controlled for her own good. "And I suppose," I said with a calm I didn't know I had, "that you're the right person to take charge of everything." "Well, yes. Who else? Your other kids who barely even call you? Your neighbors? I'm the only one who cares about you. The only one who's here when you need me. The only one who's robbing me," I said finally. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia looked at me as if I had slapped her, with a mix of shock and rage I had never seen on her face. "How dare you say that to me?" she whispered, venom in her voice. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" "Patricia, I know about the bank withdrawals. I know the house isn't mine. I know you tricked me at the closing." For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my daughter's eyes, a fear that quickly turned to fury. "You're crazy," she screamed. "Completely insane. You see? This is why you need someone to take care of you." She headed for the door, but turned back before leaving. "Mom, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Forget about these weird ideas you're getting in your head. I've been good to you, and I'll continue to be. But if you start making up stories, if you start saying I'm stealing from you, things are going to change. And you're not going to like how they change." The threat hung in the air after she slammed the door. I was left alone in my living room, trembling, but for the first time in months, feeling something like relief. I no longer had to pretend I didn't know the truth. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Every noise from the street made me jump. Every passing car sounded like it was stopping in front of my house. Patricia's words echoed in my head like a drumbeat. Things are going to change. and you're not going to like how they change. I knew my daughter well enough to know those weren't empty words. At 6 in the morning, I was already awake, making coffee with trembling hands, when the phone rang. It was Robert, Patricia's husband, which was strange because he never called me directly. "Good morning, Helen," he said in that smooth voice he always used with me, but which now sounded as fake as a $3 bill. "How are you? Patricia told me you had a little disagreement yesterday." "Robert, it wasn't a disagreement. It was—" "Look, Helen," he interrupted, and his tone changed completely. He was no longer the respectful son-in-law, but the cold accountant who knew how to handle numbers and contracts. "Patricia is very worried about you. She says you've been very confused lately, that you're saying things that don't make any sense." "What I'm saying makes perfect sense." "Really? Like Patricia is robbing you?" "Helen, Patricia has bent over backwards for you. She paid the closing costs, she's paying all the utilities for that house, and on top of that, she's managing your finances so you don't run out of money, and you repay her by accusing her of being a thief." Every word was like a slap. Robert had completely twisted my story, making Patricia look like the victim and me the ungrateful one. "I paid for that house with my savings," I managed to say. "Yes, but who handled the process? Who took care of all the paperwork? Who put in their time and expertise so you could have that property? Patricia did everything, and all we ask is that you trust us." The word "us" landed like a stone. It wasn't just Patricia. It was her whole family. Her new clan that saw me as a nuisance to be managed. "Robert, I want to talk to my other children." "What for? To fill their heads with lies about Patricia?" "Look, Helen, I'm going to be very clear with you. If you continue with these accusations, if you keep inventing that we're stealing from you, we're going to have to take legal measures to protect you from yourself." "What does that mean?" "It means we're going to prove that you no longer have the mental capacity to handle your own affairs. We have witnesses who say you've been confused, forgetful. The lawyer himself can testify that on the day of the closing, you didn't fully understand what was happening." My blood ran cold. Now I understood why the lawyer had spoken so quickly, why he hadn't explained the documents properly. It had all been planned to make me look like a confused old woman who didn't understand what she was signing. "And when we prove that," Robert continued cruelly, "Patricia will get legal guardianship over you, and then she'll be able to make all the decisions about your life, including where you're going to live." The threat was clear. The nursing home. They were going to declare me incompetent and lock me away somewhere where I couldn't bother them anymore. "But you can also choose the easy way," he added with false gentleness. "Forget about these crazy ideas. Keep living peacefully in your house, and let Patricia take care of everything like she has been. What do you prefer?" I hung up the phone without answering. My hands were shaking so much that I dropped my coffee mug, and the hot liquid spilled all over the table. I stared at the brown stain spreading across the wood, feeling it was a perfect metaphor for my life. Everything was spreading and getting messy, and I didn't know how to clean it up. That morning, I called my other 2 children. First Roy, the middle child, who worked as a mechanic in Chicago. His wife answered the phone and told me he was busy, but she would give him the message. He never called me back. Then I called Sandra, the youngest, who lived in Phoenix with her family. She answered, but her voice sounded distant, formal. "Mom, Patricia already told me what's going on. She says you've been really confused lately." "Sandra, I am not confused. Your sister robbed me." "Oh, Mom, how can you say that? Patricia is the only one who has taken care of you all these years. We live far away. We work. We have our own families. She's the one who's there with you. That's precisely why she was able to trick me." "Mom, I think you need to see a doctor. Maybe you have early onset dementia or something. It's normal at your age." There it was again. My age as the explanation for everything, as if turning 68 had automatically made me incapable of understanding my own life. "Sandra, I need you to believe me. I need your help." "Mom, the only help you need is medical. Let Patricia take you to the doctor. Take your medicine and stop inventing problems where there aren't any." When she hung up, I understood that I was completely alone. Patricia had done her work well. She had planted the idea that I was losing my mind, and my other children had bought her version because it was convenient for them. It was easier to believe their mother was senile than to face the reality that their sister was a thief. That afternoon, while I was watering the plants in the small garden I had started in the yard, Mrs. Rodriguez, my next-door neighbor, came over. She was a woman my age, a widow too, who had always been kind to me. "Helen, are you all right? You've looked so sad these past few days." For the first time in weeks, someone asked me how I was, really, with no ulterior motives. I couldn't hold it in, and I told her everything. Mrs. Rodriguez listened in silence, nodding from time to time without interrupting or judging me. "Oh, Helen," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry to hear that, but don't be too surprised. I work on weekends caring for the elderly in wealthy homes, and believe me, I've seen worse." "Really?" "Of course. Children who take their parents' pension checks, who convince them to sign power of attorney, and then send them to the cheapest nursing home they can find. Families who wait like vultures for the old folks to die so they can get their property." Her words comforted me in a strange way. I wasn't the only one. It wasn't just my daughter. It was a bigger problem, more common than I had imagined. "And what do those elderly people do?" I asked. "The ones who can, they fight. The ones who can't, they resign themselves. But you, Helen, you can fight. You look strong, your mind is clear, and you have proof of what they did to you." That night, with more mental clarity than I'd had in weeks, I began to plan my strategy. Ms. Jenkins had told me we needed more evidence, and I was going to get it. I remembered that Patricia had a habit of recording voice memos for herself, so she wouldn't forget important things. She always did it while driving when she couldn't write. If I could get access to her phone. I also remembered that Robert was very meticulous with his files. In his home office, he had folders for all his business and properties. If the house was really in Patricia's name, there had to be documents in that office. It was risky, but I had to try. My dignity, my future, and my right to grow old with respect depended on it. The next day was Sunday. Patricia always went to 11 o'clock Mass with her family, and then they had lunch at Robert's mother's house. I had at least 4 hours. For the first time in months, I smiled. If they wanted to play dirty, they were about to find out that this old woman still had a few cards up her sleeve. On Sunday morning, I got up earlier than ever. I had spent the whole night planning every detail of what I was going to do. By 8, I was dressed in my most discreet clothes, black pants and a gray blouse that made me almost invisible. I pulled my hair back into a low ponytail and put on the rubber-soled shoes I used for cleaning, the ones that didn't make a sound when I walked. For years, I had a set of keys to Patricia's house. She had given them to me when the kids were little, so I could watch them when she and Robert went out. She never asked for them back, and I never thought I would use them for something like this. But life puts you in situations you never imagined. I took the bus to New Jersey, with my heart beating so hard I thought the other passengers could hear it. In my bag, I carried a small notebook, an old smartphone my friend Frank had lent me that had a camera, and the keys that felt as heavy as lead in my pocket. Patricia's house looked quiet from the street. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and the curtains were drawn. I waited for 15 minutes, hidden behind the trees on the corner, watching, making sure no one was really there. A neighbor walked her dog and waved at me, thinking I was just the mother-in-law visiting as usual. When I was sure the house was empty, I walked to the front door, my legs shaking. The key turned smoothly in the lock, as it had hundreds of times before. But this time, it felt like I was committing a crime. Inside, everything was in the perfect order Patricia always maintained. The furniture gleamed, the pillows were perfectly arranged, and on the dining room table was a vase of fresh roses. This was the life my daughter had built with the money I had earned cleaning houses. And now, with the money she had stolen from me, I went straight to Robert's office. It was a small room at the end of the hall, filled with metal filing cabinets and a computer that was always on. On the walls were diplomas and accounting certificates, photos of him at work conventions, and a map of the United States full of red pins marking some financial projects. I started going through the filing cabinets. Robert was obsessive about order. Every folder was labeled in perfect handwriting. Taxes 2023, investments, NJ House, insurance. I looked for something related to me or my house, but found nothing in the first few drawers. In the third cabinet, at the bottom, I found a folder labeled Additional Properties. My heart raced. Inside were documents for the house on Long Island, but not just the deed. There was also a property appraisal showing it was worth almost double what I had paid. A profitability study calculating how much money they could make if they sold it. And the most painful thing, a document from a real estate agency with an estimate of prices for similar houses in the area. But what broke my heart was finding a sheet of paper handwritten by Patricia. It was a list of pros and cons about what to do with me. In the pros column, she had written, property profitability, full control of her finances, access to her pension. In the cons column, future medical expenses, risk of her finding out, possible opposition from siblings. I wasn't her mother on that list. I was a financial asset to be managed, with benefits and risks like any investment. I took pictures of all those documents with my friend's phone, though my hands were shaking so much that some came out blurry. Then I went to the master bedroom, where I knew Patricia kept her personal phone when she showered or slept. I found the phone on the nightstand, plugged into the charger. I knew her passcode because I had seen her type it many times. Her oldest son's birthday. The phone opened, and I started searching through her messages and voice memos. What I found there was worse than everything else. Messages with Robert where they planned every step of the scam. Audio clips where Patricia mocked my naivete and calculated how much longer I had to live. A conversation with a friend where she said, verbatim, my mom was always clueless about business. It was time for someone smart to take charge of her money. But the most devastating thing was an audio she had recorded the day after the closing. In it, Patricia told someone, probably Robert, with a laugh that chilled me to the bone, it's done. The old woman signed everything like a lamb. Didn't even ask what life tenant meant. Right now, she's all excited, hanging her little curtains in her house, not knowing she's just a guest. When she gets too annoying or gets seriously sick, we'll get her out with a doctor's order. And if she dies soon, even better. Fewer expenses for us. I recorded that audio with the other phone, even though listening to it hurt as if I were being stabbed. Then I checked her contacts and found the number of the lawyer, the doctor who had signed some papers about my mental state, and a place called St. Joseph's Senior Residence, evidently the nursing home where they planned to put me. By the time I finished gathering evidence, 2 hours had passed. My phone was full of photos and recordings that proved everything Patricia and Robert had done, but my heart was also shattered into 1,000 pieces. I was about to leave when I heard the sound of a key in the front door. My blood ran cold. They had come back early. I ran to the office window, but it was on the second floor, and I couldn't jump. I heard Patricia's voice downstairs, talking to her children. I had to get out of there before they came up. I tiptoed to the stairs and went down as quietly as I could. Patricia was in the kitchen with the kids, making them something to eat. Robert wasn't there. He had probably gone to drop his mother off at her house. I made it to the front door without them seeing me. But just as I was about to leave, I heard Patricia's voice behind me. Mom? What are you doing here? I turned around slowly. Patricia was standing in the kitchen doorway, wearing an apron and holding a wooden spoon. Her eyes showed surprise, but also something else, suspicion. I came to visit, I managed to say in the most normal voice I could muster. But I saw you weren't here and was about to leave. How did you get in? With the keys you gave me years ago. Patricia walked towards me, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own daughter. There was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Something cold and dangerous. How long have you been here, Mom? I just got here. Are you sure? I nodded, though I knew she didn't believe me. Patricia had always been very smart, and she could tell when someone was lying to her. Give me the keys, she said, holding out her hand. What? The keys to my house. Give them to me. You don't need them anymore. Her tone was cold, authoritarian. It was the voice she used with her children when she scolded them, but directed at me. I took the keys out of my pocket with trembling hands and gave them to her. And Mom, she added, putting them in her apron pocket, next time you want to visit, call me first. This is my house, not a public place you can just walk into whenever you feel like it. I left almost at a run, my heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to have a heart attack. But I had what I needed, enough evidence to prove that my daughter had deliberately robbed me. that she had planned every step of the scam, and that she had even worse plans for my future. That night, in my house that wasn't mine, I reviewed all the photos and recordings. I had enough material to destroy Patricia's life, to send her to jail, to take away everything she had built with my money. But I also had a decision to make. Was I willing to go all the way, even if it meant losing my daughter forever? The answer came when I remembered her words in the audio. When she dies soon, even better. Fewer expenses for us. Yes, I was willing. On Monday morning, I arrived at Ms. Jenkins' office with a plastic bag full of evidence that felt as heavy as stones. I hadn't slept all night, replaying Patricia's recordings over and over, feeling each poisonous word dig deeper into my soul. But for the first time in months, I also felt something I had forgotten: determination. The lawyer reviewed every photo, listened to every audio clip, read every document I had managed to photograph. Her expression changed as she progressed, from professional concentration to genuine outrage. "Mrs. Miller," she finally said, taking off her glasses and rubbing her eyes, "in 25 years of practicing law, I have rarely seen something so deliberate and cruel. Your daughter not only defrauded you, she documented the entire process as if it were a business transaction." She showed me the list of pros and cons Patricia had written. "This is evidence of premeditation. And these audio clips where she mocks you and plans your future. This goes beyond fraud. This is systematic psychological abuse against an elderly person. What can we do? We can do a lot. We're going to file a civil lawsuit to recover your property and your savings, and we're also going to file a criminal complaint for fraud, financial abuse, and elder abuse. With this evidence, the case is practically a slam dunk." But then her expression darkened. "However, you need to understand something, Mrs. Miller. This is going to be a war. Your daughter and her husband will hire the best lawyer they can afford, and they will use every legal and emotional resource they have to defend themselves." "What does that mean?" "They will try to discredit you. They'll say you're senile, that you made all this up, that the evidence is fake. They will pressure your other children to testify about your supposed mental decline. They will turn the trial into a media circus where you will be portrayed as the crazy grandmother who is unjustly accusing her loving daughter." Her words frightened me, but I had come too far to turn back. "Ms. Jenkins, I'd rather be seen as a crazy woman fighting for her rights than a fool who lets herself be robbed in silence." That same afternoon, we started the process. First, we went to the bank, where Ms. Jenkins requested a complete history of my account's transactions. The employee, a young woman who initially treated us with indifference, completely changed her attitude when she saw the legal authorizations and realized the seriousness of the matter. "Mrs. Miller," she said after looking at her computer screen for several minutes, "the withdrawals made by your daughter total nearly $8,000 over the last 8 months. Always amounts under $500 to avoid triggering the system's automatic alerts. $8,000. Almost 2 years of my full pension. Money that Patricia had been systematically taking while making me believe she cared about my financial well-being. Next, we went to the district attorney's office to file the criminal complaint. The assistant DA who took our case was a young man, Mr. Ramirez, who at first seemed skeptical. But when Ms. Jenkins showed him the evidence, especially the audio clips where Patricia planned to put me in a nursing home, his attitude changed completely. "This is very serious," he said after listening to the recordings. "We will open an investigation immediately, and we will request a protective order to shield you from any retaliation." That evening, when I got home, I found 3 missed calls from Patricia and 2 text messages from Robert on my old phone. I didn't answer. But Robert's last message sent a chill down my spine. "Helen, we know what you did yesterday. This is going to get very ugly for you." It was clear that Patricia had discovered someone had been in her office. She had probably noticed that some documents were out of place, or perhaps she had checked her phone and realized her messages had been accessed. The next day, very early, they came to my house. Not just Patricia, but Patricia, Robert, and an older man in a suit I didn't know. They rang the doorbell insistently until I had to open it. "Hello, Mom," Patricia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is Mr. Martinez, our attorney. We need to talk to you." The three of them walked into my living room without waiting for an invitation and sat down as if they owned the place. Technically, I thought bitterly, Patricia did. Mr. Martinez was a man in his 60s with perfectly combed gray hair and a deep voice he used to intimidate me from the very first moment. Mrs. Miller, I understand you have been spreading some very serious rumors about your daughter and son-in-law. Rumors that could be considered slander and defamation. They're not rumors, I replied in the firmest voice I could manage. They're facts. Facts? Like your daughter robbed you? Ma'am, do you have any idea how much Patricia has invested in your well-being? The closing costs, the utility bills, your living expenses. I pay for my own living expenses with my pension. A pension that isn't enough to maintain a whole house, Robert interjected coldly. A pension that we have been supplementing for months. It was a blatant lie, but said with such confidence that it almost made me doubt my own memory. Mrs. Miller, the lawyer continued, my client is willing to be generous. She is willing to forget this unfortunate misunderstanding and continue to care for you as she has been. But we need you to withdraw any complaint you have filed and publicly apologize for the accusations you have made. And if I don't... The three of them exchanged glances. It was Patricia who spoke. Mom, you know that I love you, but I can't let you destroy my reputation and my family's with lies. If you continue with this, we will have to prove that you no longer have the mental capacity to handle your own affairs. We've already spoken with Dr. Mendoza, Robert added, pulling out a folder. He is willing to testify that during your last few checkups, he noticed clear signs of cognitive decline. Dr. Mendoza was the private doctor Patricia had been taking me to in recent months, insisting that I needed regular checkups because of my age. Now I understood why he had asked me so many strange questions during those appointments, why he had insisted that Patricia be present during the visits. We also have testimony from your neighbors, Patricia continued, about erratic behavior, like Mrs. Lopez, who says you've accused her of stealing plants from your garden. That was an absolute lie. Mrs. Lopez and I had never had any problems, and my plants were still in their place. But I realized that Patricia had been building a case against my sanity for months, preparing for this moment. And of course, said Mr. Martinez with a smile that gave me chills, there's the matter of you violating my client's private property by entering her home without authorization and stealing confidential information. I had keys. Keys that were taken from you when your inappropriate behavior was discovered. The fact that you used them after that constitutes breaking and entering. I realized they were playing in a completely different league than I was. They had resources, legal knowledge, and had planned every move in advance. But I had something they didn't expect. Evidence they didn't know I had. Mr. Martinez, I said with all the calm I could muster, I don't think you've heard the recordings where my daughter plans to put me in a nursing home and celebrates the possibility of me dying soon. For the first time, I saw Patricia's face go pale. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair and the lawyer frowned. What recordings are you talking about? The ones on Patricia's phone. The audio clips where she... mocking my naivete and calculating how much money they're going to make off my house when I die. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia and Robert looked at each other with an expression of panic that gave me the first real satisfaction I had felt in months. Mr. Martinez recovered quickly. Ma'am, if you obtained that information illegally, it cannot be used as evidence. A judge will decide that, I replied, surprising myself with my own firmness. Patricia shot up from her chair. Mom, this has gone too far. I'm going to give you one last chance to sort this out amicably. Or what? Or we will prove you're mentally incompetent. We'll get conservatorship over your assets, and we'll put you in a facility of our choosing. And believe me, it won't be a nice place. Her words were the final confirmation that nothing was left of the daughter I had raised. This woman was a stranger, willing to completely destroy me to protect her own interests. You can leave my house, I told them, standing up as well. Your house? Patricia laughed cruelly. Mom, this is my house. And if you keep up with this craziness, I'll have you out of here by tomorrow. The three of them left, but before closing the door, Patricia turned to me one last time. You have until tomorrow to decide, Mom. Either you apologize and drop everything, or we declare all-out war. And in a war against us, you don't stand a chance of winning. When they were gone, I sat in my living room and cried for an hour. But when the tears ran out, I did something I had never done in my entire life. I called a journalist. The reporter who answered the phone was named Anna Vance, and she worked for a TV news magazine that focused on cases of social injustice. I had seen her several times exposing abuse against vulnerable people, and her voice on the phone sounded warm but professional. "Mrs. Miller, your case is very interesting to me," she said after I gave her a general outline of my story. "Could we meet tomorrow? I need to see the evidence you mentioned." I didn't sleep at all that night. I knew that by contacting the media, I had crossed a line from which there was no return. Patricia and Robert had turned this into a war, and I had decided to fight with the only weapons I had: the truth and public opinion. Anna Vance arrived at my house the next day with a cameraman. She was a woman in her 40s, elegant but down to earth, who immediately inspired my trust. She sat in my living room and listened to my entire story, with an attentiveness no one had given me in a long time. When I showed her the photos of the documents and played Patricia's recordings for her, her expression shifted from professional interest to genuine outrage. "Mrs. Miller," she said, after hearing the audio where Patricia welcomed the possibility of my death, "this is one of the cruelest cases of elder abuse I have ever seen. Are you willing for this to be broadcast on national television?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "I want the whole country to know what my own daughter did to me." The interview lasted 2 hours. Anna asked me about my life, about the years of sacrifice raising Patricia, about the cleaning jobs that broke my back but gave me the money to educate my children. She also asked me about the pain I felt, about the betrayal, about the fear of being left with nothing in my final years. At the end, after the cameras were turned off, Anna took my hand. "Mrs. Miller, this report is going to change your life, but it's also going to change your daughter's life. Once it airs, there's no going back. Are you sure you want to do this?" I thought about Patricia, the little girl she had been, the happy moments we had shared. But then I remembered her words. "And if she dies soon, even better. Fewer expenses for us." "I'm sure," I told her. The story aired 3 days later, in prime time. Anna had done an extraordinary job, showcasing not only my case, but also those of other elderly people who had been victims of family abuse. She included interviews with experts in elder law, social workers, and other seniors who had gone through similar situations. The impact was immediate and devastating. My phone didn't stop ringing all night. Neighbors, acquaintances, and complete strangers called to express their support. Some women cried as they told me they too had been victims of their own children. But the call that hit me the hardest was from my granddaughter Sophia, Patricia's eldest daughter. She was 17, and we had never had a deep conversation. But that night, she called me, crying. "Grandma," she said, her voice breaking, "I didn't know about any of this. My mom always told us you were having memory problems, that's why she had to manage your money. What do you think, honey? I think my mom has been lying to me my whole life, and I think what she did to you is horrible." Sophia told me that after the report aired, she had confronted Patricia, and her mother had a breakdown, crying and screaming that I had betrayed her, that after everything she had done for me, I had publicly shamed her to destroy her reputation. "But Grandma," Sophia said, "I remember when I was little and I saw how hard you worked. You would get up so early to go clean houses, your hands were always rough, and you always gave us treats even though we knew you didn't have enough to eat well yourself. How could she do this to you?" That conversation with my granddaughter was the first truly good thing that had happened to me in months. Finally, someone in my family saw the truth. Finally, someone acknowledged the sacrifices I had made. The next day, Sarah Jenkins called me, excited. "Mrs. Miller, the report was a masterstroke. I've already gotten 5 calls from top elder law attorneys who want to help you pro bono. And the district attorney's office told me they're fast-tracking the investigation because the case is now a matter of public interest." But she also warned me that Patricia and Robert would fight back. "They're going to go to the media to defend themselves. They'll say you're sick, that the report was manipulated, that it's all a misunderstanding." She was right. 2 days later, Patricia appeared on a morning talk show, dressed in black as if she were in mourning, crying inconsolably while Robert comforted her. "My mother is sick," she said between sobs. "She has early-onset dementia, and she can no longer grasp reality. We were only trying to protect her, to care for her, and she misinterpreted everything." She showed medical documents from Dr. Mendoza that supposedly proved my mental decline. She talked about how much they had spent on my care, how difficult it was to deal with a relative with cognitive issues. "I love my mother," she said with tears that looked genuine, "but she needs medical help, not lawyers who are taking advantage of her confusion." It was a perfect performance. Patricia had always been good at manipulating emotions, and she knew exactly what to say to look like the long-suffering daughter who only wanted to help her sick mother. But the public had already heard my side first, and the evidence Anna Vance had shown was too compelling. The backlash on social media was devastating for Patricia. People called her a thief, an abuser, a terrible daughter. Some even posted her home address and phone number. A week after the report, Patricia lost her job. Her boss, pressured by the bad publicity, asked her to resign to protect the company's image. Robert also ran into trouble at his accounting firm, where several clients canceled their contracts, not wanting to be associated with someone accused of elder abuse. But what really changed things was when a national advocacy group, the Center for Elder Justice, took up my case as a landmark example of violence against seniors. They assigned their best investigators and began a full audit of all the financial transactions between Patricia and me. A month after the report, the court summons arrived. Patricia and Robert had to appear before a judge to answer the charges of fraud, financial abuse, and elder abuse. The night before the first hearing, my friend Frank came to visit me. He found me organizing all my documents on the dining room table, preparing for the most important day of my life. "Helen," he said, sitting beside me, "how are you feeling?" "I'm scared, Frank. But I'm also hopeful." "Hopeful for what?" "That for the first time in my life, someone is going to truly listen to me. That for the first time, my word will be worth just as much as theirs." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Tomorrow, the trial that would define not only my financial future, but also my dignity as a person would begin. Tomorrow, I would know if justice really existed for people like me, or if it was just a privilege for those with money and education. But no matter what happened, I had already won something important. I had found my voice again, and that voice, for the first time in years, was being heard loud and clear. The day of the hearing, I woke before dawn. I put on my best dress, the same navy blue one I had worn the day I signed the papers at the lawyer's office. But this time it felt different. It was no longer the dress of a naive woman who trusted blindly, but of a woman who had learned to fight for herself. Sarah Jenkins arrived early to pick me up. On the way to the courthouse, she explained how the process would work, what questions I would be asked, how I should conduct myself. But I was barely listening. My mind was elsewhere, remembering all the moments that had led me to this point. The courtroom was packed. Anna Vance had arrived with her camera crew, and there were several journalists from other outlets who wanted to cover the case. There were also activists for elder rights, who had turned my situation into a symbol of the fight against family abuse. When Patricia arrived, flanked by Robert and their lawyer, the atmosphere grew tense. She avoided looking at me directly, but I could see she had lost weight, that she had deep, dark circles under her eyes, that the stress of the past few weeks had taken a physical toll. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of pity for her. But then I remembered her words about my death, and the pity vanished. The judge was a man in his 50s, bald, with glasses and a serious expression that betrayed no emotion. When we were all in our places, he began the hearing in a clear, professional voice. "We are here to hear the case of Helen Grace Miller versus Patricia Miller Vega and Robert Santillan on the charges of fraud, financial abuse, and elder abuse." Sarah Jenkins presented our case first. She showed all the documents, played Patricia's recordings, and explained in detail how the fraud had been executed. Her presentation was meticulous, professional, and devastating. Each piece of evidence fit perfectly with the next, painting a complete picture of the systematic betrayal I had suffered. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my legs trembling but my mind clear. The judge asked me to tell my side of the story, and for the first time in my life, I had the chance to speak without interruption, without anyone telling me I was confused or that I didn't understand things. I told them about my 40 years of work, about every dollar saved to buy a home, about the blind trust I had placed in my daughter. I spoke of the pain of discovering that the person I loved most in the world saw me as an object to be used and discarded. Your Honor, I said at the end of my testimony, I'm not looking for revenge against my daughter. I am looking for justice. I am looking for a recognition that I, at 68 years old, am still a person with rights, with dignity, with the right to make decisions about my own life. When I finished, there were tears in the eyes of several people in the gallery. Even the judge seemed moved, though he maintained his professionalism. Then it was the defense's turn. Martinez presented his version of events, trying to paint Patricia as a loving daughter who had been misunderstood. He showed the medical reports from Dr. Mendoza, argued that my accusations were the product of mental confusion, and suggested that my lawyers had taken advantage of my supposed vulnerability to create a non-existent case. When Patricia took the stand, her performance was flawless. She cried at the right moments, spoke in a broken voice about how difficult it had been to care for a mother with cognitive issues, and explained every financial transaction as if it had been done with my knowledge and approval. I love my mother, she said, looking directly at the judge. Everything I did was to protect her. If I made mistakes, it was out of love, not malice. But then Sarah Jenkins subjected her to a brutal cross-examination. She asked about every audio clip, every document, every lie she had told. And slowly, Patricia's mask began to crumble. Is it true that you recorded a message stating it would be better if your mother died soon? Sarah Jenkins asked. That was taken out of context. I was frustrated, stressed. Is it true that you made a list of pros and cons about what to do with your mother, where you described her as a financial asset? That was just to organize my thoughts. Is it true that you withdrew $8,000 from your mother's account without her knowledge? She had authorized me. With what document? It was a verbal authorization. With every question, Patricia contradicted herself more, grew more nervous, and revealed more of the truth she had tried to hide. Finally, when Sarah played the audio of Patricia mocking my naivete and planning to put me in a home, she broke down completely. I didn't want to hurt my mother, she screamed through her sobs. I just wanted to make sure she was well taken care of. Is calling your mother clueless and celebrating her potential death your idea of good care? Sarah Jenkins asked coolly. Patricia couldn't answer. She just stood there on the witness stand, sobbing uncontrollably, while the entire courtroom watched in silence. The judge declared a 2-hour recess to deliberate. During those 2 longest hours of my life, I sat in the courthouse hallway with my friend Frank, Sarah Jenkins, and a few women from the neighborhood who had come to support me. One of them, Mrs. Rosa, took my hand and said, Helen, no matter what happens in there, you've already won. You stood up for yourself, you spoke out, you showed you wouldn't be pushed around. That's more valuable than any verdict. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge read his ruling in a grave, solemn voice. After reviewing all the evidence presented, this court finds the defendants Patricia Miller Vega and Robert Santillan guilty of the crimes of fraud, financial abuse, and psychological abuse against an elderly person. I felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest. Beside me, Sarah Jenkins squeezed my hand with emotion. It is ordered that the property located on Long Island be immediately restored to the name of Helen Grace Miller, along with the full restitution of the $8,000 taken from her bank account, plus interest and damages. In the gallery, I heard murmurs of approval and some applause that the judge quickly silenced. Furthermore, Patricia Miller Vega is sentenced to 2 years of probation, and Robert Santillan to 1 year of probation, conditional upon full compliance with the ordered restitutions. Finally, the judge continued in a sterner voice, the defendants are prohibited from any contact with Mrs. Helen Miller without her express consent and are ordered to maintain a minimum distance of 500 yards from her residence. When the judge adjourned the hearing, I remained seated for several minutes, unable to fully process what I had heard. I had won. After months of humiliation, of feeling invisible and helpless, I had won. Sarah Jenkins hugged me, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Mrs. Miller. You got your house back, your money back, and most importantly, your dignity back." Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting with cameras and microphones. Anna Vance was the first to approach. "Mrs. Miller, how do you feel after the verdict?" "I feel free," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "For the first time in months, I feel free. Do you have anything to say to your daughter?" The question caught me by surprise. I looked over to where Patricia was leaving the courthouse with Robert and their lawyer. She looked destroyed, small, a far cry from the confident, manipulative woman I had known in recent months. "I only hope," I said finally, "that one day she understands that you don't show love by stealing, but by respecting, and that if she ever wants a genuine reconciliation, she'll have to start by acknowledging the harm she caused me." Patricia stopped when she heard my words. For the first time in months, our eyes met directly. I saw pain in her eyes, but also something else. Shame. Perhaps for the first time, she was truly understanding what she had done. But it was too late for easy apologies. The damage was done, and healing, if it ever came, would have to be the result of deep work on her part, not my automatic forgiveness. That night, I slept in my house, my real, legally owned house, with a peace I hadn't felt in years.